It's over, Mom. I sold the family business. The words felt like a stone thrown through stained glass. Satisfying for an instant, then immediately catastrophic. They shattered quietly in the air between us, the shards catching and refracting the stale light of our kitchen. My mother's hands, always in motion, froze over the cutting board. The knife hovered above an onion, its papery skin still intact, her knuckles gone bloodless. A summer fan clicked overhead with the patience of a metronome. I waited for her to ask the obvious questions. To whom? For how much? Why without me? But she didn't. She simply blinked once, twice. The third time, her eyes were wet, but not with grief. Something else flickered there, something I had never seen in her before. Calculation. You didn't sign anything, she said. Not a question. A verdict. I signed everything, I said, and I laid the documents on the table like evidence of a crime I did not realize I'd committed. The manila folder fanned open. Purchase agreement, escrow instructions, wire transfer confirmation. I had done it the clean way, the way any sane adult would do it, the way she had begged me to handle life since I was old enough to count change at the register. Our bakery, Halcyon Bread, the place where the town learned to eat mornings, was no longer ours. I had closed at noon and handed the keys to a man with cufflinks so polished I could see my own indecision looking back at me. The buyer was a shell, she said. You understand what that means. I understand that the company's name on the contract is Clandestine Ventures, LLC, which is stupid branding but not illegal. They paid asking price plus 5. They'll keep on our staff. They agreed to use the flour we always used. It's compassionate money. For once we get to be the people who leave a town without burning it down. My mother set the knife down carefully, as if it too were listening. You sold to someone who doesn't bake. You sold to someone who doesn't know how our ovens breathe or what happens when the humidity goes above 65. You sold to someone who didn't haggle. People who do not haggle want something more than what is priced. What does anyone ever want? I said, profit. A line on a portfolio. Let me be the villain for wanting to sleep in past 3 a.m. You're not the villain, she said softly. You're the mark. I laughed then. The brittle laugh of someone who has already spent the money in his head. You trained me to spot a con. I didn't get rolled, Mom. I got out. You didn't get out, she said. You got in. The fan clicked. The onion waited. Steam ghosted out of the tea kettle as if even the water was nervous. My phone buzzed. A polite notification from the title company. Funds cleared. Congratulations. Confetti on the screen. I turned the phone face down. What is going on? I asked. Say it plainly. Don't talk to me like a fairy tale. She picked up the knife again, but not to cut. She held it like a pointer, tapping the folder with its blunt back. Your grandfather opened this bakery with money he borrowed from a friend. That's what he told us. The friend came to our store once a month for a loaf he never ate. He brought newspapers that smelled like another city. He didn't look at the bread. He looked at the wall behind the counter. What wall? The wall you think is load-bearing because your father told you it was. It isn't. It's hollow. No, it isn't, I said automatically. We had the HVAC guy. You had the wrong guy, she said. And I told your father that. He told me to stop living in stories. He told me to stop seeing ghosts in the grout. But I kept the books, and I can read a ledger the way a priest reads a parish. The friend's name never went in, but the discount for the loaf he never ate did. Every month, for 50 years. The friend, I said slowly, is the buyer. The friend, she said, is never the one who shows up. The friend sends a lawyer with clean nails and cufflinks that don't reflect light so much as bend it. You didn't sell a bakery, Eli. You sold a vault. If she had slapped me, I would have understood her better. What vault? She walked past me and opened the drawer where we kept plastic bags that promised to be reusable and never were. Under those, she lifted a rubber mat, and under that, a photograph I had never seen. The edges had softened into the texture of cloth. In it, a young man with my jawline and my grandfather's cap stood in front of Halcyon Bread the day it opened. The bunting looked more like laundry than celebration. The window paint read Morning 5C. The man beside him wore a suit with lapels wide enough to land a mothership. He stared at the camera like a dare. His name back then was Mr. Gray, Mom said. Everyone had a color name. It was the fashion if you did business that needed aliases to feel legitimate. He was younger than your grandfather, but stood like he owned time. He didn't want bread or buns or to fund a dream. He wanted friendly infrastructure. A storefront with hours, rational cash flow, regular shipments, refrigerators, ovens, employees who could be vouched for, logs that could be produced, receipts that looked like receipts, and a wall, Eli. Always a wall. You think there's something in the wall? I think the wall is a throat, she said, and someone has been feeding it for decades, and you just sold the body it's attached to. I felt a laugh rise again and forced it back down. My mother had a way of making wild stories feel like hard math. You're saying our family business has been laundering what? Money, paper? I'm saying the friend doesn't bring one loaf a month for the romance of it. I'm saying every time the ovens broke, they didn't. I'm saying your father's life insurance paid out too cleanly for a man who drowned in a river that hates neatness. You told me it was a hiking accident. She kept her eyes on the photo. I told you the thing I could carry, and I carried it too long. I picked up the folder again, expecting the paper to weigh more. The sale is done. The money is in. What happens next is not mine. She put the photograph down and took my hand, not to comfort, but to position it, turning my palm upward. She traced an invisible rectangle in the center, the way she used to trace game boards when we played tic-tac-toe on napkins. They will come for this, she said. Not your hand, your silence. They will ask for keys and codes and heritage. They will invite you for a tour of what you used to own. They will call you family. They will call me mother. And when you say no, they will use your father's voice. Mom. They recorded him before he died. They always do. Men like Mr. Gray archive their ghosts. They put them in answering machines and playlists and email drafts like talismans. You'll hear your father tell you that everything is fine, honey. He'll tell you men like this keep the world orderly. The river inside the banks. He'll tell you to deliver a recipe card with nothing on it. I stood up so fast the chair feet shattered the quiet. You cannot ask me to believe. I'm not asking you to believe, she said. I'm asking you to go to the bakery now, before they change the locks, and take down the wall. Take down, with a hammer, with your hands, with the kind of cowardice that looks like bravery to people who need a hero. Take it down. If I'm wrong, we'll patch it with apologies. If I'm right, we'll spend money you shouldn't have gotten on a kind of freedom you don't yet want. I should have argued. I should have called the buyer, the attorney, the police. I should have done anything that made me look like I had a spine and a plan. Instead, I did the oldest thing a son can do. I obeyed the tone in my mother's voice that separated bedtime from emergency. I took the truck. The late light flooded the windshield the way memory does. Blinding, sentimental, predatory. Halcyon bread at dusk was a creature sleeping with one eye open. The gold leaf on the window had already been polished to a sterile gleam. The bell over the door chimed the way it had chimed every day of my life. Our cooling racks stood empty like a congregation stripped of hymnals. I locked the door behind me. The hum of the refrigerators was a stillness disguised. My feet knew the boards that squeaked. They led me to the wall behind the counter where we had posed every Thanksgiving with a turkey we never managed to sell to anyone under 40. I pressed on the wallpaper, thick. Tasteless vines we never bothered to replace because customers called them classic, and felt, to my shame, the slightest give. I fetched a hammer from the maintenance drawer. The first swing was an apology. The second, a conversation. The third, a confession. Plaster surrendered in sheets. Beneath it, not brick, but old wood stained darker than it should have been, as if it had absorbed the fumes of secrets. The wood was screwed to a frame that didn't match our building's bones. Someone had built a body inside the body, a second rib cage. I pried. A board cracked, then another. The air changed temperature. I smelled glue. Ink. Oil. The space behind the fake wall was deeper than it had any right to be. I reached in, expecting dust and finding a box. It was the size of a bread pan, wrapped in waxed linen and tied with butcher's twine. The exact string we used to tie baguettes like gifts. I set it on the counter and unwrapped it with hands that shook with a cocktail of terror and vindication. Inside, I found stacks of ledgers bound in hide, a set of keys with numbers stamped on them that were not ours, a map of our town with unmarked alleys circled in red, and a Polaroid that didn't belong to any decade I recognized. A photograph of my father shaking hands with Mr. Gray in front of this very wall. Gray's hair was colorless the way winter is. My father, My father was smiling. Not the smile he used on me when I brought home stars, but the smile he used when a delivery arrived early and he could please someone easy. There was something else under the ledgers, something that refracted the thin light of the prep lamps, a cube of glass no bigger than a brownie, with a lock embedded inside it like a fly in amber. The metal was etched with a symbol that looked like a circle severed by a vertical line. Not a brand, a warning. The bell over the door chimed. I spun around, stupidly bringing the hammer up like a toy. The man in the doorway wore a dark suit that did not announce wealth so much as humidity. He didn't glance at the dust or the hole in the wall or the hammer. He glanced at me in a way that made me count my bones. Elias, he said, and the way he said my name turned its 2 syllables into a ledger closed with a decisive click. I thought we agreed you would return the keys tomorrow. I didn't agree to anything between dusk and tomorrow, I said. We're closed, he smiled. He didn't have to. His smile was clearly a corporate policy. I represent the buyer. Clandestine ventures, I said flatly. He inclined his head, neither confirming nor denying. Let's not pretend we're strangers. We don't have much time. We're strangers, I said. And we have as much time as I say because this is still my... I almost said bakery. I almost lied to myself. This is still my mess. On that we can agree, he said. You've made a remarkably swift mess. He stepped inside. I stepped back. Our deal, he said, had a clause about fixtures and permanent improvements. That wall counts. That hole is a violation. If it is permanent, I said, it wouldn't come off with 3 swings. Semantics are a young man's sport, he said, and then he did glance at the counter, at the box, at the glass cube with the lock sleeping inside it. The smile didn't falter. The eyes did. They cooled. May I? He asked, already reaching. I put the hammer between his hand and the box, like a bad idea turned into steel. You may not. He switched to another corporate policy smile, the one for negotiating with children. Elias, this is not about you. It never was and never will be. The people who built this city made arrangements that predate your ability to spell arrangement. You can return our property now, and we will confine our correction to your accountant. If you do not, I will be instructive with the people you love. Try, I said, and I hated the way my voice trembled, but I liked the way the word tasted, stupid and hot. Something in the man's attention shifted, the way water shifts when a boat moves beneath it. He glanced to the door. 2 shapes stepped in, framing him. Not men in the caricature of muscle you see on bouncers, just men built like patients, hands empty in a way that meant their pockets were not. You can keep the ledgers, the man said. Artifacts, souvenirs. Your family likes the romance of paper. The keys and the glass are ours. Tell Mr. Gray, I said, improvising a name while trying not to stare at the Polaroid that would make my improvisation unwise. That if he wants his toys back, he can come ask for them himself. Mr. Gray, the man said gently, does not attend closings. And he does not retrieve. He only places. Other colors handle retrieval. What are you? I asked. Mr. Beige? He laughed then, genuinely, and for a heartbeat I saw him as a person who went home and worried that his child would hate him. In another decade I was called Ash. These days names are retired like jerseys. We've professionalized. Professional crime, I said. Congratulations on the MBA. He sighed as if I had disappointed him and made a small gesture. The patient men moved forward. I did the only thing I could do. I picked up the glass cube and threw it at the floor. I expected a dramatic shatter. The cube bounced like a ball and cracked the tile it hit. The sound it made was not a sound a bakery should hear. The men froze, not in fear but in respect. Ash made another gesture, this one smaller. You can't break it, he said. You can only open it. And you can only open it if the lock recognizes your family. Wonderful, I said, and I held the cube high as if I could bring down the ceiling with it. Then we'll keep it as an heirloom, next to the rolling pins and the grief. You will give it to me, he said. No more smiles, or what? I asked. He looked at me as if I had finally asked a sensible question. Or your mother's debt comes due. What debt? He glanced at the hole in the wall again, and then at my face, as if checking my capacity for pain. The friend never gives gifts. Your grandfather paid in loyalty. Your father paid in silence. Your mother, Elias, paid in blood. He slid a photograph out of his inner pocket the way a magician slides a card. I didn't want to see it. He handed it to me anyway. My mother, 20 years younger and ferocious, stood beside a man I didn't recognize in a hospital corridor, holding a child I didn't know. Not me. Not my sister who died before I could remember her. The caption on the back in my mother's handwriting read simply, "We did what we had to. Who is this?" I whispered, even though I knew there was a long answer, and that Ash didn't bring this to inform me. He brought it to measure how quickly I fell apart. "Collateral," he said. "A life in exchange for a life. You broke the math when you sold the building. We cannot leave our numbers in your care. Give me the cube and the keys." I did something foolish. I ran, not out the front. They expected that. I flung myself through the kitchen, through the back prep room, through the door that led to the alley where the sugar deliveries came at an hour when the world smelled like wet cardboard. I heard Ash sigh into his sleeve as the patient men followed. I had the keys in my palm, the ledgers shoved under my shirt like armor, the glass cube clutched in my left hand. The alley breathed cold on me. I ran right because right had always meant river. Left meant trouble. Halfway down the alley, I discovered that direction had changed its definitions without telling me. A van blocked the exit. Its paint was a black that made more black, and its engine idled with a purr that betrayed a price tag. The van door slid open as if anticipating me for years. A hand reached out, not to grab, but to hail me in. "Eli," a voice said, and it was my father's voice, cracked by late hours but laced with a melody I would have recognized in a crowd of dying. I froze so fast the cube bit into my palm. I turned. The patient men were not running. They were walking the way grief walks. Ash stood in the kitchen doorway, small, polite, disappointed. My father's voice came again, a little more urgent, as if the tape were warming up. "Son, it's okay, it's me. I need you to get in the van. We're going to fix the ovens together." Ovens. He had put that word in my chest like a lockpick when I was 5. I stepped forward before I knew I had stepped. The interior light in the van flickered on. It revealed not my father, but a rectangle of foam and wires, and a speaker with a company logo sanded off. A hand, attached to a forearm with a scar I recognized, reached past the speaker and shut it off. "Enough," my mother said from the van. "He's already done the stupid part. Let him do the brave part now." For a second, no one moved. Then the passenger seat reclined, and there she was. My mother, hair pinned up with bakery clips, face set the way she set it when the oven thermometer lied. She was holding something I had never seen her hold. A gun. Not the cartoon kind. The kind that looks like you should call a lawyer just to be allowed to look at it. Her other hand was on the van door. "Eli," she said without looking at me, "into the van." I went. The cube pressed into her lap as I stumbled in. She tucked it into a metal box bolted to the floor beneath the seat with a gesture so practiced I realized it wasn't her first. The patient men had stopped walking. Ash had stepped into the alley, his hands raised until they were chest height, palms up, as if lifting an invisible tray. "You joined the theater somewhat late, Miriam," he called. "Your son has already taken down the set." "Go tell Mr. Gray," she called back, and there was an old burn in her voice, a scar I had never asked about. He left a match in the wall. "I found it," Ash sighed. "You always were sentimental. You always were disposable," she said, and then she slammed the door and we were moving. The van reversed, and there was a physics to it I had never felt in our lives. Mom shifted gears, and the street became an argument our tires were winning. I had 100 questions and no tongue. I watched her profile as the town we fed blurred by, and I understood that the knife not cutting the onion earlier had not been a pause. It had been an omen. "How long?" I said finally, the question ripping itself free of me like a splinter. "Have you been this? A mother?" she said, and the smallest smile touched the corner of her mouth. "A soldier," I said. "Since before your father forgot which river he was standing in," she said. "Since a man with a color for a name tried to turn my daughter's hospital room into a bank." "Hospital," I said, and the photograph burned in my pocket. "I came into this marriage with debt," she said. "Your grandfather bought a bakery with the kind of money that stains even decimals. Your father inherited the debt and believed he could refinance it with kindness. He couldn't. Mr. Gray doesn't accept kindness as currency. He accepts leverage. When your sister was born, he brought flowers and a contract. I told him to eat the flowers. He laughed and attached a rate to my refusal. When she died, he sent a condolence card that felt like a bill. I never knew, I said, which felt like saying I had never noticed a season. You were a child, she said, and her voice, which had been steel-coated, warmed enough to be human. You were a child, and I was trying to keep the monsters in the pipes. Your father and I disagreed about the method. He believed in keeping the peace. I believed in keeping receipts. You kept receipts in a wall. I kept proof of life, she said. Proof that what they call order is actually arithmetic with a knife at the throat. When you told me you sold the bakery, I thought for a second I could forgive the past for being so stubborn. Then I remembered how Mr. Gray holds grudges like breath. Where are we going? I asked. To the only place in this town where people still answer questions without asking who else is listening, she said. The church. You don't believe? She said. I believe in what buildings remember. We did not pull into the church lot. We rolled behind it and idled in the shadow of its brick, the kind of brick that absorbs sermons like wine. Mom killed the engine and sat and breathed in a way that made me realize she had been holding her breath since I was born. Give me the keys, she said. I gave them. She chose the one stamped with a 7 and inserted it into a metal panel behind the driver's seat I had mistaken for a rust patch. The panel clicked and opened like a mouth. Inside, a second steering wheel and a set of switches labeled with old words: bell, cellar, ladder, choir. She flipped choir. Somewhere inside the church, a light turned on. She flipped cellar. Somewhere beneath us, the earth remembered a door. Since when do you have a secret van? I managed. Since people with fake companies learned to read deeds, she said. Come. She turned off the interior light, and we stepped into the kind of dark that belongs to old buildings. The air smelled like wood that has forgiven many sins. We followed a narrow path between hedges that had been cut by someone who understood how to make a straight line look accidental. A door disguised as a maintenance hatch yielded to the key with a 3. We stepped down. Stairs, stone, older than the bakery, older than Mr. Gray, older than the concept of selling anything. At the bottom, a small room, a table, 2 chairs, a fan that didn't click, and a safe embedded into the far wall with the same circle and line symbol etched above it. I didn't put that there, Mom said. Then who did? The people who were here before the friend, she said. There's always a before. Sometimes it helps. She set the glass cube on the table. It hummed, the way certain memories hum when you touch them. The lock inside it aligned itself with the symbol on the safe, like a compass made of hunger. The keys in her hand suddenly felt like nonsense. She placed her palm on the cube and closed her eyes. What are you doing? I asked. Trying to answer the question they think I can't, she said. What debt looks like when it grows teeth. She opened her eyes. Do you trust me? Yes, I said, because we had already crossed the bridge where that word was either a savior or a trap. Then put your hand on the cube. If it recognizes our bloodline, it will open. If it doesn't, nothing happens, and we go back to the simple plan of running until their maps run out of roads. I put my hand on the cube. It was warm the way a beast is warm. For a second, nothing happened. Then the lock inside the glass clicked. It was not the click of a door. It was the click of a history deciding to let one person in and no one else. The safe in the wall made a sound like a throat clearing in a courtroom. The door eased open a hair. Behind us, a footstep. We turned together. A figure stood half in shadow, half in the kind of light that makes faces into confessions. He was not Mr. Gray. He was older. He wore a cardigan the way a knife wears a sheath. He had been in our lives for years. He had baptized me. He had given our bakery a discount on festival days. He was Father Ansel, and he held a phone in his hand already dialing. I wondered how long before you remembered the choir switch, he said mildly. I thought perhaps Miriam had given up on dramatic entrances. My mother's gun didn't rise. It lived. Turn the phone off, Father. I must call, he said. It's time. Time for what? I asked, ocean empty and horizonless, accounting, he said simply. The kind we keep after the other kind fails. You sold the family business, Elias. You sold the ledger. Did you think the church wasn't a stakeholder? I thought the church baked casseroles and held raffles, I said, flailing for any shore. We do both, he said, and in between. We prevent men like Mr. Gray from confusing their appetite with God. He slipped the phone into his pocket without completing the call. You were supposed to come to me first. You were supposed to ask for the old absolution. He eyed the cube. But your mother likes her own liturgy. Do you work for them or for me? I asked, child again. I work for the town, he said, which means I work for whoever holds the lock and doesn't lie about it. We're not lying, Mom said. We're improvising. Even worse, he said, and then gently, Miriam, put the gun away. It doesn't suit the acoustics down here. She did not. You're going to help us open the safe. I'm going to watch you do it, he said. I'm going to witness who you become when the door swings. The safe door was heavy but not stubborn. It yielded with a sigh that might have been mine. Inside, there were no bars of gold, no bricks of the stuff that makes men stupid. There were documents. Stacks of them. Some crisp and recent, others brittle and brown with a smell like distant rain. At the back, a simple wooden box engraved with the same symbol, circle cut by line. My mother reached toward the box the way surgeons reach toward hearts. Father Ansel put a hand on her wrist. Careful, he said. What is it? I asked. Weights, he said. And when I did not understand, he added, balances. Mom lifted the box. It was heavier than it looked. She set it on the table, and for a second we all listened to it as if it might make a noise to tell us what lived inside. She opened it. The hinges complained only once. Inside, 3 items. A laminated index card with 5 names typed on it in a font the town had grown up with. A ledger with a red spine. And a coin the size of my palm, not gold, not silver, something denser. Stamped with that same unfinished circle, but this time on the reverse, with a date that made my scalp tighten. The year my sister died. Explain, I said to the room. To the fan, to my own blood. The card, Father Ansel said, is the ruling party. The 5 names who, together, can close the friends' accounts. The ledger records the favors. The coin, he paused, his voice gentling not at me but at my mother, is what they used to balance the debt that year. You mean, I said, they minted a moment of our grief. They made it into currency, he said, because men like Mr. Gray only respect what can be tallied. Mother's face changed in a way that made me understand she had just learned something she had suspected for 2 decades and dreaded being right about. Who minted it? She asked. Father Ansel did not answer. He looked at me. Don't, I said. You want an enemy? He said. You want a single throat to put your hands around. The truth is pettier and more durable. The mint is us, the town, the institutions that wear good clothes. We made systems that were never designed to forgive. We turned charity into leverage, and grief into interest. Mr. Gray didn't invent the appetite, we did. He only learned how to send invoices that arrived on time. So the coin is a key, he said, and a reminder. We stood there with the coin and the ledgers and the cube and the keys like actors who discover the play is an instruction manual. Above us, the church breathed. Beyond that, the town lived as if morning would come and bread would be waiting. What happens if we don't pay? I asked. Some debts evaporate, Father Ansel said. Others collect themselves. Mr. Gray can't burn a town without burning his own investments. He prefers precision. He will take what matters just enough to hurt and not enough to unite you against him. He already tried to take my father, I said. He succeeded, my mother said, and the bluntness of it finally collapsed an old piece of me I had been shoring up with holiday lights and denial. He succeeded because we tried to bargain with a river. Then we don't bargain, I said. We balance. I picked up the coin. It was cold in a principled way. It had a hole in the center. A keyhole? No. An absence meant to be filled by something like decision. My mother looked at me with a pride so fierce it pricked. Father Ansel nodded once, as if blessing a risk he couldn't control. The fan wobbled and finally clicked. Above us, a car door shut, then another. Then more, like rain beginning. My phone vibrated. A text from an unlisted number. A photograph of our front door at home. The caption, "Please do not be late again, Elias. We hate to ring twice." Ash, I thought, or someone duller with a better camera. They'll comb the town, Mom said. They'll comb the church if we let them. We have a day, maybe less, before they put on a uniform and call it an inspection. Then we do this now, I said. We use the names. We call the 5. We close the account. Father Ansel lifted the index card and read the names aloud. 2 made sense. The current mayor, The police chief who still had his first badge polished by his mother on holidays. 2 made me swear. The chair of the bank we owed our mortgage to. The hospital administrator who had sent a fruit basket when my sister died. The 5th was a surprise I should have expected. Miriam Hale, he read. Acting for the Hale estate. My mother stared at her own name as if it had been carved on a headstone no one asked her about. I was added without anyone asking my permission. Your husband added you, Father Ansel said. The day before he drowned. What? She said, and the single syllable fell like a plate on tile. Stop telling us the worst news in footnotes, I said. Say the truth, Father. He folded the card and put it in his pocket as if to prevent me from eating it. Your father wasn't a coward, he said, plainly, not as a funeral note. He tried to pay a different way. He tried to end the arrangement by making it untenable for the friend to continue. He transferred power to Miriam in a way Mr. Gray could not ignore. He then walked into a river with pockets full of information and let the current decide whether mercy was real. The current, my mother said. And now she put the gun down. Mr. Gray, the current is a phone call. The river is a room with no witnesses. You blessed his memorial, she said. You said he was brave. I still believe that, Father Ansel said. If you believed it then, she said, you'll forgive me for asking you to choose a side now. I have already, he said, and he gestured at the open safe. I opened the door. The coin fit the hole in the center of the cube's lock with a reluctance I recognized in myself. It turned not with a click but with a breath. The glass softened the way some glass does at the right temperature. It didn't melt. It changed its mind. The lock unfurled like a petal. Inside the cube, a thin sheet of metal lay against the bottom, stamped on one side with the circle and line, on the other with 5 tiny rectangles. Slots. The names, I said. The 5, my mother said. We punch them. She looked at Father Ansel. You called it a balance. It's a vote, in a way, he said. If 3 agree, the account can be closed. But each signature has a price. Of course it does, I said. Somewhere above us, a fist hammered on wood. The church, insulted, held its breath. We didn't have time to meet anyone in their offices and pretend to be polite. My mother took out her phone and texted the mayor directly. Emergency. Choir room. Now, if you bring a car with a seal on the door, I will tell your wife about the other choir room. The dots appeared immediately. On my phone, a new message arrived. Eli, don't go home. Don't go to the bakery. Come to the pier. Alone. It was signed, Dad. I tilted the screen so my mother could see. She shook her head almost imperceptibly. They'll use him until his voice breaks, she said. And if you answer a dead man, they'll make him die twice. But I felt something pull. Not belief, a gravity encoded in bone by lullabies and stories about the first oven we bought. What if? I said, and hated the weakness in it. Then he'll understand why you didn't come, she said. If he's anywhere that matters. The mayor slid into the room with his tie in his pocket and sweat at his temples, and for a second, I believed this town could save itself. Miriam, he said, as if we were sharing a table at a fundraiser. Father Elias, I hope this is... He saw the cube and remembered how to swallow. I see. You'll sign? My mother said, not sweetly. And you'll do it for free. Nothing is free, he said reflexively. Your re-election can be, she said. I have the ledgers. I have the receipts that say you believed in a balanced budget, because someone else pledged to pay what didn't balance. He ran his hand through his hair and became a man with a vote. Give me the slot, he said. I'll be the first. We pressed his card, a metal strip we carved with his name on the spot using a tool from the safe, into the first rectangle. It glowed like a cigarette. 1 of 5, 4 to go. The police chief arrived with a story about how he had been on his way to arrest me for destruction of property, and how strange it was to end up here instead. He met my eyes and for once did not perform. I never liked their schedules, he said. You'll have your vote. 2 of 5. The banker sent her deputy with a bouquet of excuses. We turned him away and watched the slot remain blank. The hospital administrator sent no one. The 5th signature, my mother's, waited in gold on the card like a bruise that hadn't flowered yet. 3 is enough, Father Ansel said. 3 closes the account. It doesn't end the habit, my mother said. But it starves it. For a while. She pressed her strip into the 3rd slot. The cube made a sound I felt in my teeth. It slid a single folded sheet from its interior like a tongue giving up a secret. I unfolded it. It was a list of addresses, not ours. Not anyone's I recognized. Safe houses, perhaps. Or drop points. The top of the sheet read, "Transfer instructions upon closure." Beneath the addresses, a final line in small type that made my scalp tighten again. If the signatures were coerced, the closure will trigger repossession. What does that mean? I asked, already knowing I would hate the answer. It means if Mr. Gray can argue we forced the mayor, Father Ansel said quietly, he can claim your house, your van, your bakery, your mourning. He'll make the town pay the bill we refused, my mother said. Above us, the hammering grew structured. Boots moved like sentences with clear punctuation. The church had company that wanted to be seen. We run it anyway, I said. We call his bluff in daylight. We don't give him daylight, my mother said. We give him a mirror. She took the list from me and circled an address in red with a pen I had seen her use to label pumpkin tarts. He keeps his ghost here, she said. Old theater downtown, closed for renovations since before you were born. That's where he recorded your father. That's where he will wait to count the money he thinks he still owns. You've been there, Father Ansel said. I've been everywhere they told me was none of my business, she said. It turns out mothers own the invoices for none of my business. Then we go, I said. We take the cube and the coin and the list and we end it where he started it. We go, she agreed. And we go loud enough to force him to either shoot us in front of a town that has finally found its common sense or to sit down at a table and discover that we built a new one while he was counting old chairs. The mayor wiped his face and straightened his shirt, already rehearsing an apology for a speech he hoped not to give. The police chief checked the chamber of his duty weapon, then holstered it as if holstering a habit. Father Ansel put his hand on my shoulder and squeezed once, priest and conspirator and neighbor. When this is done, he said, come back and make bread without a second ledger. I don't know how, I said. You do, he said. You were born in a kitchen. We left the church in a service entrance I had never noticed, into a night that had learned our names. The van waited with its panel open like a command center lit by thrifted lamps. Mom slid behind the wheel and the rest of us became cargo with agency. The town outside was both itself and a map with fewer exits. We drove without sirens and with purpose. Halfway to the theater, my phone buzzed again. A message this time from my father's old number, which I had never deleted because I had never been willing to decide where to store his voice. A single line. The first oven you fixed alone had a loose thermocouple. You jimmied it with a paperclip. You didn't tell me because you wanted to make me proud without asking. Meet me at the stage door. I felt my eyes heat. He knows, I said. He knows me. He studied you, my mother said. Never confuse intimacy with love. They filmed us ordering coffee for this moment. He's right about the thermocouple, I said. That doesn't mean he deserves your feet, she said. Listen, if we're separated in there, we won't be, I said. If we're separated, you do not go toward your father's voice. You go toward the silencers. Find the men who don't talk. They're the ones who matter. We parked 2 blocks from the theater and walked the rest like patrons late to a baffling show. The building's facade had been stripped of posters and pride. The stage door was a rectangle of steel with a number pad that looked out of place among bricks that had learned to fall apart with grace. The coin fit into a slot where a handle should have been. The door whispered open. Inside, the theater smelled like a basement that had learned opera. Our footsteps made the hushed sounds footsteps make in places where people once judged one another's work. The stage was lit by a single work light. In the center, a table. On the table, a phone. Beside the phone, a loaf of bread. Mr. Gray stepped out of the wings the way weather steps out of certain afternoons. He was older than the photographs, but younger than the shadow he cast. He did not have color. He had the absence of it. 2 men followed him, 1 patient, 1 bored. He lifted his hands to shoulder height, palms out, a gesture I had seen Ash use. At last, he said, the Bakers family. We're not bakers, my mother said. We're accountants with flour on our faces. He smiled without malice. That's why I liked your husband. He was honest about wanting to sleep. You don't get to say his name, I said. I won't, he said. He doesn't belong to either of us anymore. Why the theater? My mother asked, as if discussing a choice of venue for a kindergartner's recital. Because the town knows how to pretend here, he said. And I prefer people to be in practice. He gestured to the bread. I ordered one last loaf before I closed your account. You're closed, my mother said. 3 of 5. 3 is enough if the room in which the decision is made doesn't smell like fear. He touched the phone with a fingertip. It played my father's voice, soft as morning. It's okay, Miriam. Let him go. Let Eli sell if he wants. We can start over anywhere if we start together. My mother closed her eyes. She didn't weep. When she opened them, they were the same eyes that had taught me to spot underproofed dough at a glance. You recorded a man trying to make his house peaceful, she said. You turned it into an invoice. I made a copy, he said. You built the original. Don't pretend you didn't. You loved a world where every morning made you matter. That is a debt like any other. You paid it with your children and your sleep and your kindness. I merely managed the schedule. Here's the schedule, I said, and I put the cube, humming now like a hive, onto the table beside the bread. You leave. The town stops pretending your patience is safety. We bake bread. We don't bake your ledgers into it anymore. He examined the cube like a surgeon examining an X-ray of a tumor he had installed as a prank. If I leave, he said mildly, the habit stays. It finds another name. It wears another cardigan. Maybe, I said, but it will have to start over without this. I lifted the coin. You minted my sister. You balanced your book with her breath. You don't get to keep the key. Something flickered across his face then. Not remorse, not fear. Something like admiration he hadn't asked his training to approve. You learned, he said. And you learned quickly. I would have hired you. You did, I said, when I was born. The police chief stepped forward and the mayor beside him, and the theater suddenly felt young with possibility. Gray watched them with the neutrality of a man measuring new chairs. If you arrest me, he said to the chief, you will not find any of my paperwork in rooms you can enter. If you rally the town, half of them will realize they liked the quiet. If you threaten me with noise, I will threaten you with math. But you'll feel better, and for a while that's the only currency people spend. Then feel worse, my mother said. For once, feel worse and keep going. She pressed her strip, the one that represented our broken house, into the 4th slot. It glowed so bright the theater's dimness answered it. She looked at Gray. We don't need 5, she said. We need enough light. He stepped back then, just one step. And in that step I saw him not as a myth, but as a man who had not accounted for one variable, a mother who stopped bargaining. The phone on the table chirped like a bird that had learned only one song. He reached to silence it. I reached faster and smashed it with the hammer I had not realized I was still carrying. It splintered in a way that was satisfying and expensive. The recording died mid-syllable. The breath left my father's made-up lungs with a gasp that had never belonged to him. Gray did not flinch. You should have kept it, he said. You'll miss him? I miss him, I said. Not the way you make me miss him. Footsteps sounded behind us. Not Ash's patience. Not bored. Other. The banker had come after all, drawn either by rage or grief or arithmetic. She took in the room, the cube, the coin. She looked at Gray with a fury that tasted personal. You told me the Hale boy would keep the building, she said. You told me the account wouldn't move. People sell at inopportune times, he said. And you punish them, she said. I correct them, he said. She looked at me and at my mother. Do it, she said. Use my slot. Why? Gray asked, almost curious. Because my mother brought me to your office when I was 8 and you showed me a drawer full of other people's wills, she said. And you told me I could grow up to be neat. I don't want to be neat anymore. We carved her strip. We pressed it in. 5 of 5. The cube shuddered as if discovering it had a skeleton. The coin still in my hand, softened like glass does under perfect heat. It bent into a ring that didn't fit any finger. It fit the stage door's handle instead, as if telling us even exits can be revisited. The work light brightened, then died and came back. Somewhere in the building, a series of locks opened without permission. Gray watched the air change and understood that, for once, his schedule had been rewritten without his pen. "What did you think this would buy you?" he asked very quietly. "No performance left." "Time," my mother said, "and not the kind you charge interest on." Sirens approached. Not ours, not his, the kind that do not belong to either side and therefore belong to the moment. The mayor squared his shoulders. The police chief, finally unafraid to look tired, took out his phone and called a number he had given too many favors to and said, "It's over," the way men say it when they mean, "Begin again." Gray lifted his hands as if surrendering, but really, I realized, as if forming the shape of a room where he might rebuild. "You won't like what happens next," he said. "We already don't," I said. He nodded once, as if we had all passed a test none of us could grade. He walked toward the wings, his patient men filtering with him like breath returning to a body after being held too long. He didn't look back. Men like him don't. They merely subtract and wait to see who fails to balance. In the days after, the town did not become a movie. It became itself, which was stranger. The bakery's locks were changed twice, first by the company with a name like a joke, then by us with a locksmith who cried when we showed him the ledgers because he realized every tip he had ever given us had kept him poorer than he deserved. The church took down a plaque that had always been there and had never meant anything in particular. The bank chair retired to a lake house whose mortgage was suddenly audible. The hospital administrator sent a real fruit basket with bruises in it. The mayor spoke 3 times, and the third speech was almost true. We reopened Halcyon Bread on a Tuesday, because Tuesdays are for honest beginnings. There were lines. There were questions. There were envelopes full of apologies, and one full of a map with red circles that someone thought we needed more than they did. My mother baked a loaf that burned because she was thinking about funerals. The second loaf sang when she sliced it. We sold bread and not absolution. We fixed the oven thermocouple with a paperclip, and then we called a real repairman because miracles do not have to be permanent to do their job. A week later, a postcard arrived with no return address. On the front, a photograph of a beach not far from the river where my father drowned. On the back, a sentence. "A habit is just a god with better PR." It was not signed. The stamp was crooked. My mother pinned it to the corkboard beside the schedule and the list of who had a new baby and who needed soup. At night, sometimes, the van's panel still hummed to itself like it remembered a different career. The cube lived in the safe beneath the counter, where we keep the petty cash, and the belief that people mean what they say when they ask for cinnamon instead of sugar. The coin was a door handle at the back of the theater for 6 days, until someone pried it off and left it on our doorstep with no note. We mounted it over the oven like a warning to ourselves. Don't mint your grief. Hold it. When the friend sent someone new to buy a loaf he wouldn't eat, he didn't look at the wall. He looked at me, and for the first time since I picked up a hammer, I did not look away. I rang him up for exact change. I asked if he wanted a bag. He said no. He said he liked to carry things that mattered in his hands, so the weight could remind him he was still here. I nodded. He left. The bell over the door chimed like doctrine. "It's not over," the police chief told me later, sitting on a milk crate in the alley as if the city had given him a smaller throne. "It won't be, but it's over for today." "That's enough," I said, and I meant it. My mother wiped the counter the way she always had, little circles until a surface remembered its function. "You sold the family business," she said, finally able to say it without making a myth of it. But what I didn't know was that it would buy us a different family. "Whose?" I asked. She lifted the edge of the coin hung over the oven, letting its cool weight speak. "Ours," she said. "The one that wasn't picked by ledgers." That night, I locked the front, checked the ovens twice, counted the till, and turned off the lights. The wall we had torn and repaired looked like skin that would scar beautifully. I stood alone in the dark bakery and smelled sugar, yeast, and an old world learning to live without an accountant in its lungs. My phone finally was quiet. No voices, no recordings, just the possibility of a morning that belonged to whoever had the courage to get up and make it. I went home and slept until the hour my father used to call the border between night and reason. And when I woke, I walked back to the bakery through a town that had learned, if only for a breath, That suspense can be a bridge and not just a trap. In the weeks that followed, people told me their versions of our story. Some made me a hero too big to fit behind a counter. Some made me an idiot with good luck. My mother let them talk. She took their orders and their conspiracies with equal patience and the occasional raised eyebrow. When a reporter from the city asked her if she had known all along what the wall was, she said, "I knew it was hollow." That's enough information for any woman to plan a life. A month later, a mechanic popped his head into the bakery and asked if anyone had called for a repair on a van with a panel that said choir. We told him he had the wrong address. He looked at the coin over the oven and shook his head like a man who recognizes symbols in places he did not expect them. "If you ever need a ride no one notices," he said. "I still know how to make a straight line look accidental." He left one of those business cards you only give people you expect to never see again. We filed it under R for Rapture because we had not yet invented a system that could alphabetize everything we were becoming. One evening, as the first cold returned and the town began to remember the way winter makes all promises sound like lies, a letter arrived with a stamp that had been peeled back and stuck on again with care. It contained no threats, no accusations, no invitations. It contained a recipe for a kind of bread we had never made. Dense, slightly sweet, surprisingly light at the end. In the margin, in handwriting I had seen only in my memories of a cabin and a toolbox, someone had written, "Try this when the lines get shorter. You'll think it won't rise, it will." Signed with a symbol, not a name. The circle and the line, drawn imperfectly, as if by a man using a dull pencil on a moving train. We made it the next morning. It did not rise at first. We waited. We did not pray to coins or cubes or men with weather for names. We kept our eyes on the dough. It rose, we baked it. People lined up, even those who swore they were done with us, with debt, with drama. They ate. Some cried. Some asked nothing and left change hefty enough to tilt the tray. We closed early that day, not because we had sold out, but because we wanted to walk to the river before the friend remembered how to breathe our names. We stood on the bank where the town pretends the water is wild, and watched the current fail to learn any new tricks. My mother threw the smallest pebble she could find into the water and said nothing. I looked at the surface the way you look at a window you've finally cleaned. I did not ask for answers. I did not imagine my father's hand breaking the surface like a lesson. I let the river keep what it had taken, and I kept what it had left. The knowledge that some debts end when you stop paying attention to the wrong ledger. Back at the bakery, I taped a sign inside the office door where only we could see it. It was nothing neat. Just a sentence I wanted to memorize in my hands. We open at 4. We close when the story does not need us. And underneath, in letters that wouldn't impress anyone's accountant, I added, "Never again mint grief." Spend mornings. The friend hasn't been back in person. People with names that double as weather rarely are. We still sell to men who don't eat what they buy. We still check the wall not because we distrust it, but because we learned to love the sound of hollowness leaving a room. When the fan clicks, it clicks on time now. When the phone rings after midnight, I let it sing. The voice on the other end belongs to whomever I decide it does. And every time I pick up the hammer to fix something that got loose, I remember the first swing, the second, the third, and the way a life can sound when a wall turns back into a room.